My name is Sienna Myers. I'm 34 years old and I've spent 12 years getting paid to catch people lying. So when my husband's sister slid my credit card out of my purse at 3 o'clock in the morning while I slept 20 feet above her, she picked the wrong sleeping woman. By sunrise, $9,000 was gone. Clothes, electronics, and plane tickets to Orlando for her kids. When I laid it all out in my own kitchen, my father-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, she'd never do something like that. And I just smiled because here's what none of them knew. The card she pulled from my purse wasn't the card they thought it was. It was the one card in the state of Ohio that I had no power to forgive. What happened at my father-in-law's dinner table 5 weeks later with a $9,000 check, a pasta, and 2 pieces of paper? My family still isn't speaking about it. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where family secrets come to light and quiet women stop being quiet. If stories about standing your ground inside your own family speak to you, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and be sure to subscribe, because this one starts with a floorboard creaking in the dark. Let me back up. I'm an investigative reporter at the Dayton Herald. 12 years on the job. I've sat across from crooked contractors, a county auditor with 3 sets of books, and one pastor who robbed his own building fund. I don't rattle easy. 8 months before that night, I married Nathan Caldwell. He's 36, fixes heating systems, and reads a room faster than anyone I've ever met. I used to think that was charm. I learned later it was training. You get good at reading weather when you grow up inside a storm. We bought a 2-story house on the east side of Dayton that spring. First house for both of us. I loved it the way you love a thing you built yourself, which is to say completely and a little fiercely. My purse hung on a hook by the kitchen door, same spot every night, because I am a creature of habit, and the hook was Nathan's idea. Sunday dinner at his father's house was not an invitation. It was a standing order. Frank Caldwell, 66, retired mechanic, deacon at his church, carved the roast every week like a man performing surgery on live television. 8 months in, my seat was still at the corner of the table next to where they stacked the serving trays. I mistook the seating chart for shyness. It was a ranking. Nathan's mother had passed 4 years earlier, and her chair stayed empty, pushed in tight like the family was still reporting to her. I wanted a real place at that table. I can admit that now. I wanted it more than I let myself know. And that want is exactly the handle they would try to use to move me. Dana came to us in September. She's Nathan's older sister, 38, divorced, 2 kids, Kyle, 12, and Tessa, 9. She lost her front desk job at a dental office in the spring, and by Labor Day, there was an eviction notice on her apartment door. Nathan asked me on a Tuesday night. Dish towel in his hands. Voice pitched low like he was asking for something shameful. 6 weeks just till she's on her feet. I said yes because of the kids. I want that on the record. Tessa still slept with a stuffed rabbit that had 1 ear. You don't send that back to a car. So Dana took the guest room downstairs. The kids took the den, and my quiet house started running like a bus station. Week 2. $60 in cash went missing from the console by the front door. Week 3, my perfume started evaporating faster than science allows. I noticed because noticing is my whole job, and I did what a sensible woman does. I put a lock on my office door. I moved my grandmother's jewelry into the fire safe. I told Nathan calmly at the kitchen table. He rubbed his face and said, "Maybe you moved it and forgot." I hadn't. He knew I hadn't, but I watched something close behind his eyes, some old shutter coming down, and I decided not to push. My purse stayed on its hook by the kitchen door, because a woman has to grab her keys at 6 o'clock in the morning, and because some part of me still believed a bedroom hallway was a border no one in the family would cross. I wrote the missing cash in my notebook anyway. Habit. I document everything. I just never thought I'd need the file. The first Friday of October, I went to bed at 11. Nathan was in Columbus overnight for a job. Around 3 in the morning, a floorboard creaked in the hallway below. I surfaced halfway out of sleep the way you do in a full house. A thin line of light slid under my door and moved away. I thought, Kyle's getting water. I thought kids drink water at terrible hours. I rolled over. That's the moment I've replayed the most. And I've made my peace with it because a woman who can't sleep in her own home has already lost something bigger than money. At 6:40, my alarm went off and my phone was already screaming. Not the alarm, the fraud alerts. They'd been lining up since 2:47 a.m. patient as churchgoers. I sat on the edge of my bed and scrolled. 247 3 airline tickets to Orlando plus a hotel package $4,860, 331 an electronics, order phone, and tablet set for store pickup, $2,300 $415 children's clothing 3 online orders stacked back to back. I did the math twice, because my hands wanted something to do $9,000 to the $9,000 spent, while I slept in my own bed in my own house with my purse on its hook downstairs, while somebody stood over it in the dark and made a shopping list. The house was quiet under me. Somewhere downstairs, a cartoon was already playing and a pan was heating and a woman was humming. I sat there in the early light with my phone in my lap, and I did the thing I do at crime scenes. I got very still and I started keeping track. I called the card's fraud line before I brushed my teeth, locked it, disputed the charges, asked for details the way I asked sources for details. Slowly twice, the airline booking had passenger names. Dana Caldwell, Kyle Caldwell, Tessa Caldwell. Departing in 9 days, the electronics order was under Dana's name for pickup, her cell number attached. The clothing orders shipped to my own address, which takes a special kind of confidence. And every purchase had been placed from the same internet connection. Mine, the house WIFE, my house. I stood in my bathroom holding the phone, and I want to be honest about what I felt because people imagine rage, and rage came later. What I felt first was recognition, the same cold click I feel when a spreadsheet finally confesses. Then I went downstairs. My purse hung on its hook, looking innocent. I opened it. Wallet there, cash there, cards there. But my everyday card was sitting in the wrong slot. Backwards, shoved in the way you put something back in the dark when your heart is beating fast. Dana stood at my stove in my kitchen, frying eggs, humming, wearing a robe I didn't recognize, with the tag still tucked in the sleeve. Kyle and Tessa were on the couch, washed in cartoon light. Morning, Dana said bright as a bell. You want eggs? I looked at this woman, my husband's sister, mother of 2 children I genuinely loved, standing in the warm smell of butter like nothing in the world had happened. I said, no, thank you. What I wanted was my $9,000 back. What I wanted even more, though I couldn't have said it yet, was to be wrong. I have never once in 12 years been that kind of wrong. I waited until the kids took their cereal to the den, and then I put my phone on the counter, alerts up and said, Dana, we need to talk about last night. She glanced at the screen and her face did something I'll never forget. It didn't fall. It rearranged. That's crazy, she said. You got hacked. It's everywhere. People get hacked. I said the tickets had her name on them, her children's names. Hackers do that, she said, flipping the eggs. They use real names, so it looks legit. There were shopping bags in the guest room, with the tags still on. There was an airline confirmation printed, folded in the kitchen trash under the coffee grounds. I know because I looked. Because looking is what I do. Nathan got home at noon and went grey. Then he did the thing I should have seen coming. He called his father. Frank arrived within the hour, filling my doorway in his church jacket, and he sat down at my kitchen table like a judge taking the bench. He listened to me for 30 seconds. 30, I clocked it. Then he raised one hand, gentle as a crossing guard, and said the sentence that would run this family for the next 5 weeks. She'd never do something like that. Not a question about the tickets, not a glance at his daughter. He said it the way you say a thing. You have decided to make true by saying it. Dana looked at the floor with her jaw set, and I realized she wasn't afraid of being caught. She had been caught before. She was waiting. The way you wait for a machine you trust to finish its cycle. And the machine was sitting at my table patting my hand. Frank's voice went warm next. And that scared me more than shouting. Whatever happened here? He said family handles family. We don't need banks in this. We don't need police in this. You cancel those. What are they? Disputes? You cancel them and I'll get to the bottom of it my own way. He said it kindly. He said it the way a man offers to carry your groceries. And around my kitchen, the weather changed. Nathan sat down, not next to me. I noticed that with a reporter's eye on a wife's stomach, he sat at the middle of the table, equidistant, a man locating himself between two countries. He was 36 years old and he sat like a schoolboy called to the office, shoulders straight, hands flat. I had never seen my husband sit like that. I said as evenly as I could, that the bank was already involved, that I'd locked the card at 7 that morning, that this is simply what you do, the way you call the fire department when the curtains are burning. Frank's jaw moved. Something old crossed his face. Not guilt. I'd have recognized guilt. It looked like betrayal, like I was the one who had reached into the family's pocket. You called them already, he said quiet, before you called me. And there it was in his arithmetic. The theft was weather, but my phone call was a choice. Dana let out a breath she'd been holding since breakfast. The machine had finished its cycle, and it had found in her favor, the way it always had. What none of them understood yet, what even I only half understood was that this particular call had never been mine to skip. Monday morning 8:15, my desk phone rang at the Herald. It was Carol from finance and Carol does not call to chat. Sienna, she said, we've got a fraud flag on your corporate card, 9,000 over the weekend. You need to come down, and I sat there with my coffee going cold because that was the piece I hadn't told the family yet. The piece I'd been turning over all weekend like a stone in my pocket. I carried 2 cards from the same bank. My personal card and the Herald's corporate card. The heavy platinum one I use for records, requests and travel. The one that sits in the outside slot of my wallet because I use it most. In the dark at 3 o'clock in the morning, working fast out of a purse that wasn't hers, Dana hadn't taken my card. She'd taken the papers. Do you understand what that means? Because Frank didn't. It means the money she spent belonged to a company, and the fraud she committed was against a bank. And there is no version of this where Sienna decides to be sweet and let it go. Corporate card fraud triggers a process. Mandatory report. A signed affidavit within 10 business days of issue, swearing the use was unauthorized. And then the bank and the company decide what happens next. Not the card holder, not the wife trying to keep Sunday dinner peaceful. I explained this to Carol's office with my badge in my hand, and then I sat in my car in the parking garage and laughed once, short and not entirely sane. My father-in-law wanted this handled inside the family. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, in the dark, she chose. Dana had reached past every card I had the power to forgive and stolen the one card that answers to nobody's family. If you've ever been told to keep the peace while somebody picked your pocket, put it in the comments. I read everyone because from that Monday on, keeping the peace stopped being on the menu. That night, I told Nathan all of it at our own table with the kids' TV murmuring through the wall. The card was the Herald's. The report was filed because it had to be filed the way a nurse charts are wound. I watched my husband take this in. And I watched him understand it about a beat and a half slower than he should have, because half his mind was already down the road at his father's house, bracing. "Don't tell Dad yet," he said. "Let me think." I asked him what exactly there was to think about, and I asked it gently because I loved him, and because I could see him standing in a doorway I couldn't see. He said, "You don't know what it does to him. Police banks. You don't know what it does." I filed that sentence away, too. Meanwhile, down the hall, Dana had gone quiet in a new way. Around 9, I heard the front door, and through the window, I watched her load the electronics bags into her car. And I knew where she was going. The store. 40 minutes round trip to hand it all back like a library book. Like returns run backwards through time. She came home with the bag still full. Too late. The retailer had already flagged the order for the bank that morning. Some doors closed the moment you open them. She stood in my driveway a long minute under the porch light holding a tablet box, learning that for the first time in her life. Wednesday evening, Frank came to my house. He knocked twice and then walked in because in his mind every Caldwell door was his door, and he sat at the head of my table, without being asked. From his jacket he drew a long envelope and laid it down square, the way men of his generation present serious things. Inside was a cashier's check for $9,000, and under it a single typed page. I read the page twice. It was a statement addressed to whom it may concern, declaring that Dana Caldwell was an authorized user of the card in question, that the purchases were made with my knowledge, and that no crime had occurred. There was a line for my signature. He'd already paid a lawyer to draft it, which told me he'd thought this through, which was somehow the worst part. $9,000, Frank said, tapping the check. "Every dime it's over. She'll pay me back out of her own hide. That's between her and me. You sign, the bank closes it, and this family goes back to being a family." I told him the truth plainly. The money wasn't mine to accept. The card belonged to the Dayton Herald. The victim on paper was a newspaper and a bank, and I couldn't authorize backwards something that was never authorized. Frank blinked at me, and I watched the sentence bounce off him like rain off a waxed hood. "Then tell your company you gave her permission," he said, simple. He honestly could not hear it. In 66 years, no truth had ever stood outside his kitchen. There had never been a fact in his life that family couldn't outvote. I slid the check back across the table and watched his hand close over it. Slow, and for one cold second, I understood I hadn't refused money. I'd refused a citizenship. The next week, the machinery woke up. A fraud investigator from the bank called my cell at work. Polite, flat, thorough. A woman named Alvarez who asked questions in the exact order I would have asked them. Where is the card kept? Who had access to the residence? Had the physical card left my possession before? I answered like a witness because I was one. Then came the email, and after it certified mail, an affidavit of unauthorized use, 10 business days to sign and return. The Herald's counsel walked me through it in a conference room with bad coffee, and he did not soften it. If I signed the affidavit, I was swearing the use was unauthorized. True. And the bank would refer the file wherever files like that go, which at $9,000 in the state of Ohio is a felony des. If I signed Frank's statement instead, swearing Dana had permission. 3 things happened. The company's money became my personal liability, since lending out a corporate card breaks every policy I'd ever initialed. My name went in front of HR, with the word misuse attached. And counsel looked at me over his glasses when he said this. A false statement to a federally insured bank is its own crime with its own name, and people have gone to prison for it. So there it was, laid out in laminate and fluorescent light. My whole adult life, telling the truth, had been my trade. Now it had a deadline, 10 business days. I drove home the long way that night, past the river. And I remember thinking that Frank believed he was protecting his daughter from a system. He wasn't. He was asking me to feed myself to it in her place, and he would never once see it that way. Then the family arrived by phone in waves like weather systems. Aunt Lorraine called first. Nathan's great-aunt, 81, sweet as pie crust. Honey, families don't do this to each other. I asked her gently whether she meant the stealing or the reporting. And she went quiet in a way that told me she'd never once put those two things on the same shelf. A deacon's wife from Frank's church found me on Facebook. Praying for your family in this season of confusion, she wrote, which is church for we've heard and we've picked cousins I'd met twice, texted Nathan paragraphs. Nobody called Dana. I want you to sit with that. In 5 weeks, as far as I could ever learn, not one member of that family called the woman who actually took the card and asked her why. The calls all came to me because in their physics, I was the moving part. Dana's stealing was like winter. Nobody's fault. Endure it together. Me reporting it was a decision, and decisions have owners. The cruelest one was quiet. Frank at Sunday dinner because yes, we still went. Nathan white-knuckled the whole drive, stood to carve and said, grace, and added, at the end, eyes closed. Lord, we know Margaret is watching over this family. She always knew how to keep us together. Margaret, Nathan's mother, 4 years gone. He never said my name, and he never said Dana's. He just laid that good woman's memory on the table like a fourth piece of paper for me to sign. I sat in my corner seat by the serving trays and I recognized the play because I've covered politicians. When the facts are against you, don't argue the facts. Change the question to loyalty. Everyone at that table passed the potatoes and looked at me like I was the one holding the knife. I did what I do when the ground moves. I went to the records, not to build a case. The bank was building the case fine without me, but because I needed to know what I'd married into, and public records don't change their story depending on who's at the table. It took 2 lunch hours. Dana Caldwell, 2 prior evictions in 2019 and 2022, both dismissed after payment in full. Pair of record on the second one, Franklin R. Caldwell. 3 small claims judgments, all settled, all quiet, and one I had to work for. A police report from her old dental office 6 years back, a cash drawer short by hundreds. Restitution made, charges never filed at the employer's request. I sat with my notebook in the Herald's morgue, surrounded by 100 years of other people's worst days, and the picture assembled itself the way pictures do. There was no one desperate midnight in my kitchen. There was a system, old and well-oiled, and it had been running since before I ever met this family. Dana falls, Frank catches, the paperwork disappears, and everyone calls it love. My $9,000 wasn't a crisis. It was a subscription renewal. That same night at home, Nathan went up to the attic to dig out a suitcase for a work trip, and he was gone too long. I climbed up and found him kneeling under the bare bulb in front of an old carton, with his own name marked on the side in a boy's handwriting. Marcus. No, it said Nathan. Keep out in fat childhood letters gone brown. He wasn't opening it. He was just looking at it with an expression I'd never seen on my grown husband's face. Then he shut the flaps, said, old junk, and carried the suitcase down past me. I didn't push. I wrote the box in my notebook. The affidavit arrived on a Thursday, certified in an envelope so official it practically cleared its throat. 10 business days from that stamp. I read it once at the counter. 1-page plain language. I did not authorize. I did not consent. I understand this statement may be used in criminal proceedings. A line for my signature. A line for the date. And then I did something I still think about. I folded it in three and put it in my purse. The same purse on the same hook by the same kitchen door. And that's where it lived from then on. My own little unexploded thing hanging by the coats. I'd touch the outline of it through the leather every morning like a bruise you keep checking. That same night, Nathan finally told me about the $40. We were in bed, lights off, his voice coming out of the dark the way confessions do. In 1971, his grandfather, Frank's father, wrote a bad check for $40 at a hardware store in Sienna. 12th of the month, a Tuesday. The store pressed it. The county was making an example that year, and 2 deputies came to the house at breakfast and took him out the front door in handcuffs, with his coffee still steaming on the table. Frank was 11. He stood on the porch in his socks and watched the neighbors watch. The family lost the house within a year. His mother cleaned 3 buildings a night for a decade. The marriage didn't survive it. And the man who came back from county wasn't the man who left. Dad's told it exactly once that I know of. Nathan said at Mom's funeral of all places, he stood by the casket and said, "Nobody I love will ever owe the law again." I lay there in the dark doing reporter math. 55 years, 1 bad check, and every crooked thing this family ever swallowed since. All of it interest on $40. 2 nights later, I couldn't sleep. And at 2 in the morning, I found Dana at my kitchen table with a mug of tea she hadn't made from her own groceries. We looked at each other in the stove light. 2 women in one kitchen, at the exact hour she'd chosen for her shopping trip. And she must have decided the hour made us intimate, because she talked. I was going to pay it back. She said, "You know that, right?" Before anybody even noticed that was the plan. I asked her how on no job, and she waved the question away like a fly. Then she leaned in and gave me the closest thing to honesty I ever got from her. "You have everything, Sienna. You get that right. The house, Nathan. A job where they print your name. My kids have never been on a plane. Never. Tessa asks about the ocean like it's a cartoon place. It was for them." Her eyes were wet and her chin was up, and I realized I was watching a woman read her own defense aloud and find it airtight. She didn't believe she'd stolen anything. In her arithmetic, there was a great big family account somewhere, and she was simply overdrawn against it, the way she'd been overdrawn her whole life. And someone would top it up, because someone always had. My purse had just been the nearest branch office. "The kids keep asking if we are still going," she said. And there it was. The return policy on her apology. Even now, the trip was alive in her head. I told her the truth. The tickets were flagged funds. Nobody was flying anywhere on that money. She looked at me the way you look at a broken vending machine. Then she rinsed her mug, said good night, and went to bed. Not once in all of it had she said the word sorry. The deadline got inside my marriage on a Tuesday. Nathan came home from a bid that went sideways, poured himself a drink he didn't finish, and said without looking at me, "Can't you just sign it?" "Dad's paper. It's only paper. And I want to be fair to him, because I love him, and because he is also a casualty in this story." He said it the way a tired man says it, not a cruel one. But something in me went very quiet and very young. Here is what I've never told anyone in that family. When I was 16, my mother sat on the edge of my bed crying, holding a shut-off notice, and I walked to my closet and took down the envelope where I kept my college money. 3 years of babysitting and register shifts. I handed it over and she kissed my forehead and said, "You're such a good girl. You never make it worse." I want you to hear that sentence the way I finally heard it. Not "you matter." Not "I'll fix this." You never make it worse. That was the wage. That was the whole wage. And 2 years later, the lights got shut off anyway. And the envelope stayed empty. And I left for school on loans I finished paying at 31. So when my husband said it's only paper, I heard my mother's mattress creak. I said, I've signed that paper before, Nathan. It doesn't buy love. It rents silence. And the rent always comes due again. He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see two trainings fighting in him, his and mine. Have you ever been the one who never makes it worse? The one who pays so nobody has to talk about it? Tell me in the comments, because I know I'm not the only one. And hold on, because what my father-in-law did next I truly did not see coming. It reached my newsroom on a Thursday. Frank golfs badly socially, and one of his foursomes sits on the Herald's business side, and I will never prove the phone call happened, which is exactly how calls like that are designed. What I can prove is the sequence. Thursday, Frank's golf partner had lunch with our publisher. Thursday afternoon, a rumor moved through my newsroom with its collar up.